Welcome to the only wrestling podcast that covers the WWE developmental system from its inception to modern day. From OVW to MCW, the HWA, Deep South, FCW, and much more. Hosted by Brian Asbury and Mortimer Blankenship. Now let's dive into what could have been, what should have been. Welcome to Developmentally Speaking.
Hey, before we get in this episode, can you do us a favor? Will you go ahead and subscribe to the channel?
Will you ring that notification bell?
And if you would, give this video a like. Well, enough of that mumbo jumbo. Let's get to the episode.
Let's talk developmentally speaking, glow up, and connecting through wrestling.
Hey everybody, I'm Morty.
And I'm Brian.
And on today's episode of Developmentally Speaking, we have the one, the only, the voice of OVW himself, Dean Hill. Mr. Hill, how's it going?
Well, so far so good.
Awesome.
Good.
I appreciate y'all thinking that I'm worthy of being on your podcast.
Oh, for sure,
more than worthy. Oh, trust me.
Multiple reasons.
Multiple reasons. Well, I'm going to start out with the first question I ask every person that comes on here. What made you get into wrestling?
Well, I got into professional wrestling totally by accident. As many people know, I was a Louisville City police officer for 25 years, 1972 to 1996. And as an off-duty job, which I took back then because my first wife and I got divorced. I needed to make a little extra money. We did split everything right down the middle. She took the house, I took the payments. She took the car, I took the payments. She took the furniture, I took the payments. As an off-duty job, I started running security at Louisville Gardens. I did that for 17 years. And I've done a lot of amazing things at Louisville Gardens. I've met a lot of amazing people. I sold a gun to Steven Tyler of Aerosmith. I've had a steak dinner with Ted Nugent. I was a bodyguard one weekend for Barbara Mandrell, who was the Reba McEntire of her day. And on Tuesday nights, I used to walk the bad guys to the wrestling ring with some uniformed security guards from Andy Frayne Security. And that's where I got to know all of these people and got to know all of the wrestlers. There was a match one night where Jerry the King Lawler and Superstar Bill Dundee were actually wrestling up into the seats of the arena, and they had it partially blocked off. And so as they started getting up into the rafters, if you will, a lot of the people started trying to run around the top of the arena to get over there closer to them. And I needed to cut them off so that they couldn't do that. So the way the chairs were made at Louisville Gardens, and they're still there, the seats could go up and down, but the backs of the seats and the arms were fixed. And I needed to run up there really quickly, and I was young, athletic, and played softball 5 nights a week and played on the basketball teams and the football teams and all that stuff when I was younger. I didn't think anything about it. I just kind of put my foot on one of the arms of the seats, and I ran up on the top of the back of the seat, which was basically like 1.5 inches wide. And I just ran up to like the 15th or 20th row on the back of those seats. Well, Jerry Jarrett's and Jeff Jarrett's grandma, Jerry Jarrett's mom, Miss Christine, saw me do that and thought that was one of the coolest things she'd ever seen. And so what used to happen is from time to time, the ring announcer could not be there to do wrestling at Louisville Gardens. And the gentleman that I worked for at Louisville Gardens, his name was Al. He was the general manager. I ran security for him for Louisville Gardens. And one night, the ring announcer was going to be able to be there, and he said, hey, Dean, do you want to do this? Well, I was always a class clown. So I said, well, heck yeah, I want to do it. That'll be a blast. So they said, well, here's a microphone and some money, and go up there, and here's the list. Just do this and do this. And so I went up there totally unprepared that night and just got up in the wrestling ring with them and said, "And in this corner," and blah blah blah. And Miss Christine approached me afterwards and said two things. She said, "Dean, there's something about your voice, and I don't hear it because it's in my head, but she said there's something about your voice, and the ring announcer can't be there next week either. Can you do it again?" And I said, "Well, sure, I'd love to." So I went home and I turned on professional wrestling. I had never watched it. My grandparents were big boxing fans, so I'd watched a lot of boxing, but never pro wrestling. And so I looked at Mean Gene Okerlund and Lance and everybody and said, "Oh, okay. So, well, the only thing I really need to do then is lower my voice just a little bit and learn to say, weighing in at 275 pounds from the parts unknown Louisiana, he is, etc." And so I put on a coat and tie next week and went in there, and Jarrett said, "Okay, Dean, here's what you need to know. Say anything that you want to before you ring the bell. Say anything that you want to after you ring the bell at the end of the match, but don't say a darn thing between those two times unless we tell you to say something." Okay. So I went into the ring that night and I announced the card. And at the end of the night, as I was walking up, or walking out, I should say, Miss Christine walked up to me and offered me the job.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's wow. Like just and you do have a legendary voice.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And you do have a legendary voice. She's right. There's something about your voice. It is very legendary. Like he has said multiple times.
There's a few things burned in my brain, and it's your voice. It's Jim Cornette, "Hello Kentuckiana," every OVW episode, and then 4400 Shepherdsville Road. It's all burned in my brain. It's like OVW was what I grew up on, and I've been there many times, and I've seen. A lot of people don't know is there was a lot of magic in everything that you guys did down there, and it was, now that YouTube is bigger and stuff, people are starting to see. But outside that Kentucky and Indiana area, there a lot of people didn't get to see all these people and everything that you guys were doing, and that's why we wanted to start this to help tell everybody's story, because you all did amazing things down in Louisville, Kentucky.
Well, I appreciate that. But that was Nightmare Danny Davis. Danny, and this is how I started with Ohio Valley Wrestling. The first story was how I got into pro wrestling, period.
He figured out what our next question was going to be. So
I'm sorry?
You figured out what our next question was going to be without us asking it. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, then, this is how that happened. I was on the beat one day riding down in the Portland neighborhood, and I noticed somebody inside of a building that I hadn't seen anybody in that building before. So I stopped for a second and looked in through the front window, and it was Danny Davis. And so, "Danny, what are you doing?" So, "Well, I've decided that I wanted to get off the road, and I wanted to start a wrestling school to teach young men and women, professional wrestling." I said, "Oh, that'd be a great idea." He said, "Yeah, I'm just kind of starting here right now, but I'm looking at another facility over in southern Indiana." And the next time I talked to him, he had, him and Rip Rogers met me at a, I think like Joe's Crab Shack down on the river. We were having, was it? I think like maybe my mom and my wife was taking me out for a birthday meal. And so they came and sat down, and we were sitting there eating and talking. And Danny said, "Not only are we wanting to start a wrestling school, but there's a time coming that I am wanting to start a television show. And I can't do it unless you're interested in being the MC for the show." So I said, "Well, I'm not sure. I mean, I'd be glad to try, but I've never done something like that before. I'd never done any of this stuff before." And so Danny ended up calling Jerry Lawler and said, I'm getting off the road and I want to start a wrestling over here in by that time he'd moved over to the Quadrangle in Jeffersonville. And he said, I'm going to start a wrestling show over here every week. Can I have your permission to use Dean? Because that's what you did back then. You called and asked for permission, and Lawler said, "Oh yeah, sure, you're more than welcome to use him as long as you don't use him on Tuesday nights." So because I needed to be at Louisville Gardens on Tuesday nights, and so Danny started on Sunday night over at the Quadrangle. Started on Watt Street on one side of it, then within a matter of a few months moved over to a much better location, which was on Mechanic Street on the other side. And then he had an opportunity to start the TV show, and I was honored to have, and am honored to have done the first 1,100 of them, but I had absolutely no idea what I was doing on the very first one, and fortunately got a little bit better as time went on, and I had the honor of working with a wide array of people in OVW. I started off with, I want to say it was the Hustler, Rip Rogers, and then there was 1 or 2 days that I worked with Dutch Mantell. Then Les Thatcher came down, and him and I did some stuff. Gosh, who else was part of that? Obviously, Kenny Bolin and I had done a lot of them, but then Cornette, that was the biggest connection for Danny, was Jim Cornette. His mom, God rest her soul, she's been gone for some time, but his mom, of course, Jimmy was in New York or Connecticut, if you will, with WWF back then. He wanted to be closer to his mom because of her health issues. And so Jim left and moved back here to Louisville. And so Jim approached Danny, and Jim reached out to Jim Ross, and I forget the other gentleman's name right now, but they started basically an open door policy with WWF sending talent to Danny and Rip and Jimmy for them to train them, and that's what really took OVW to the next level.
Absolutely.
For sure, yeah. So how did it change, like, the atmosphere? I know there was a plethora of talent. I know everybody talks about the big four with Cena, Batista, Orton, and them. My favorite is the first four. So the Damager, Rob Conway, Nick Dinsmore, the Machine.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like just seeing these guys, evolve over time, and just seeing these people grow? And
well, it's a great thing. I was introduced. We were at Louisville Gardens getting ready to do something. I forget what it was, and Nick Dinsmore was there, just pretty much straight out of high school, if I'm remembering it correctly. I think he went to like Providence High School in Indiana. And so I met him, and there was Frank Miller, who was Trailer Park Trash. A lot of those guys from back then. It was very rewarding seeing some of them go to the next level. But there's two sides of every coin. And there were also those guys that had the big dreams of going to the next level that it just didn't, unfortunately, work out for them. Mm-hmm. And you can say that for any organization in the wrestling world, not just in OVW. There's a lot of guys that went to the WWE that thought that they were going to be there for, years and years and years and years. And for some reason, it just didn't work out. Mm-hmm. So it's the same at our level as it is in all of these levels. There was people that came to us that had dreams and saw them. The Damager, Nick, Rob Conway, I think I already said the damage, but there's quite a few more that had the opportunity that went there, and some of them really made the best of that opportunity, and some of them made a couple of decisions that weren't the right decision at the time and ended up losing the opportunity.
Oh yeah, and that's another reason why is so we got to see people like Seth Skyfire and so many others that were down there that didn't quite make it to the main roster.
Johnny Spade.
But the work that they did, like their run on WWE doesn't define their whole career, and I feel like a lot of people assume that, but they put so much effort into their time in OVW, and that's what I like to remember and I like to see, and that's what I always recommend people to go watch. You know, when Nick Dinsmore was Mr. Wrestling, and then you know the Revolution, and there's so many great moments, tag teams, singles. Just it's a shame that not everybody got to see who they were before, you know, what the WWE had made them on a national stage.
Right. Like, if people could have seen what, you know, I mean, Dolph, besides Dolph, the members of the Spirit Squad, what they did in OVW, like, how impressive they were. Not saying that they weren't impressive in WWE, but in OVW, they just could do so much more because they weren't put under this character that was really an automatic shelf life character that they gave them, unfortunately. You know, but Johnny Jeter, Mike Mondo, you know, those
Giant killer himself.
Yeah, like they're just some of the best workers that have ever been in the business. That just in our minds really got a raw deal, and that's why we've created this.
Well, it's a great thing that you've done. Yeah, those guys. You know, sometimes it is the moment that you get an opportunity to go. What's going on in the world at the moment? Sometimes, you know, they think they've got a great idea and they get there and the idea just doesn't work out. Jeter and Mike Mondo and all the guys that were, there's been so many things in my wrestling career. Sometimes I don't remember all of the particulars about it because there's been so many things, and that's sometimes a blessing and a curse. But when they went up there as the little cheerleader team, the guy cheerleaders, that was a great opportunity for them. They'll remember it for the rest of their lives. But you know, once they leave us, I lose track of them because there were so many wrestlers coming right behind them, and I had to let them go out into the world, and I had to focus on who was coming in the door now. Right. Because I just had just that little segment. But there was one young man, and I'll tell you, this is a perfect example of how something can be out of your control. This young man, it's been 25 years ago. Maybe I'm not 100% sure, but he was a great young man. He had I think his mom or dad, like the Middle East, and so he had this great look with the headdress on, kind of like a smaller version of the Iron Sheik, if you will. And he was being brought into the WWE, and they were going to make something big out of him. He wasn't the biggest guy in the world, but he had the look that they were looking for at that time. And he was sent to the WWE, and like the week before or a few days before, they were actually going to bring him down the aisle, was 9/11.
That's Magnus, right?
And that killed his career. Because they thought that if they brought him down the aisle, somebody would shoot him.
Right, that was
amazing. But yeah, I can see that. So sometimes it's not whether or not you're good enough. Sometimes it's the unforeseen that happens in the world that changes whether or not you make it in that career.
Right. Was that who, was I right in saying that? Is that who I think that would have been? Like,
I think it may be someone different because 01 is.
01 is when that,
Yeah.
so it would have been.
So it would have been Mark Magnus, right? That's a different.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
That
you
sounds
are right.
correct.
I was about to say Magnus, that whole situation was, that was
That's
rough.
exactly what it was. Again, so many people, I've had so many people come in front of me, and I've announced so many people that I lose track of some of the ones from 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. That's just unfortunate, but that's the way it is.
How about the time Johnny Jeter got in your face?
Oh man, I wanted to ask that one. You took it from me. So I was taking a drink. I wanted to ask that one. Yeah. How about the infamous Johnny Jeter incident?
Oh, gee, what are you talking about?
You were so colorful.
Oh man.
Oh, I loved it.
I trust you're talking about me telling him he was number one.
Yeah. Told him he was number one more than once. Yeah.
What would you like to hear the story?
Yes,
Yes.
please.
Yes.
For those, because the clip used to be on YouTube, and now it's gone, so it's
Oh,
hard
really?
to find. But it was viewed a lot of times.
For 50% of it was us.
Paul Heyman. Paul Heyman had come to OVW and was working there for a period of time. And he approached me and said, do you have any problem saying the word F you? And I said, I rode the downtown area of Louisville for many, many years. Sometimes that was part of asking for your driver's license. And so I said, no, I don't have a problem doing it. Are you sure you want to do this? And he said, oh, yes, I'm positive I want to do this. And Danny would say, I don't know if this is a good idea. And he said, oh, it'll be great. Don't worry about it. It'll be fantastic. He said, but don't do it just a little, do it a lot. Do it big, as you were. So I said, okay. So we're out there doing the bit and sitting next to my dear friend Al Snow. And so I start doing what Paul Heyman wanted me to do. And as I got up and basically said the word to him, I don't know if I'm allowed to on our podcast.
Feel free. Feel free. You're not, we don't have a problem.
Well, feel free. We'll send that to Johnny.
Hey, Jeter, I still love you and you love me and you know it. So basically, he said, I want you to explode. And at the end of it, I want you to say, fuck you and walk out. And so I just basically exploded. And I said it and I walked away. And as I was walking away, it just jumped in my head that, I don't think you said that strongly enough. That's when I turned around and I walked back to him and I said, fuck you. And turned around and walked away. And I remember when I walked away, there was a small, like a 7-year-old or 8-year-old boy that was in the front row over there, and he was doing the Macaulay Culkin.
Oh God!
So I went into the back, and when I walked in around the corner, Paul Heyman jumped out of his chair, ran over and kissed me on the cheek, and said, "That was great. Get out of here." So I walked out the door, and I said to myself, God, please don't let there be anyone on the other side of this front door. Because people were running after me trying to see what in the world was going on that were on that side that could see me. And I kicked the front door open and stormed out. And thank God there wasn't an 80-year-old woman standing behind it because she'd been calling the hammer.
That was such
many,
good
many
TV.
years ago. But that was one of the things that I was asked to do that ended up being on, like you said, on YouTube. And it was one of those things that my grandkids were going, Papa, why did you do that? So that's the story.
That's awesome. It was good TV. I remember.
Oh, yeah.
I remember being like, "Yeah, hell yeah, Dean!" I was so happy. I was like, "Get him!" Oh, because
Did you have a gavel in your hand? You hit something, then you started banging your. Oh, I loved it.
I had the hammer that we
Yeah.
rang the bell with.
Yeah, you just like bam and started beating up.
I love it.
Threw it down or something like that, and I was just trying to I was trying to lose it the best that I could lose it, because that's what they wanted me to do.
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. Very, very memorable for sure. Absolutely.
How about OVW today? So OVW was the first and only to survive before and after a developmental deal, and it seems like it's going pretty strong today, with Al Snow taking over, and it just seems like it's growing and growing.
And it is. I retired in 2020, and what happened was there were the people that had followed OVW through the years via the internet, back when Cena was the prototype and Batista was Leviathan and all that stuff. The people that followed us around the world on the internet knew who I was. But the people that were, once OVW went to Al, and I was actually ready to retire at that point. He asked me if I would stay on because he needed someone to be a commissioner type of a personality. So I stayed on that. But they started in 2020 going global, not just the people that were watching us from back then, from the people that were becoming new fans. And the people that were coming new fans had no clue who I was. So they needed someone whose face was recognizable to people in Germany and Japan and pick a country that were wrestling fans. The obvious solution to that was Al, because he was, being a Hall of Famer, he's known around the world. So that was the time that it was time for me to go ahead and retire. So I've been gone since basically the summer of 2020. I went and did a few shows that they did over in Indiana during the height of the pandemic. But what has happened since then, I watch it from time to time on TV when my wife will let me. She had enough years of watching professional wrestling, so she's not that thrilled about it anymore. But I can't tell you all that much about OVW now and what the talent's doing. I know it's all great guys and gals, and anybody under the influence and the tutelage of Al Snow is going to be great and going to be in a position of their life where they're going to have an opportunity to go to the next level as well. But to really give you some insight as to how things are going in OVW right now, that's more of a question for Al.
Oh, no worries. Yeah. What's Dean Hill doing now?
Well, sitting in my basement.
There you go.
There you go.
Oddly enough, one of the things that not a lot of people know is that for many years, I'm a musician as well. I play 3 instruments, and for many years, I was either playing bass guitar in a band on a Friday and Saturday night in a club, or I was playing drums in a band.
Nice.
And so I was playing with a group that was playing. We had done some weddings, as a matter of fact, and there was a lady that we were going to play her son's wedding in September of 2016. And myself and the lead guitar player, who was an amazing guitar player, but he was a jerk, we ended up getting into it one night. And I quit playing with that band. It was a great group. It was called TJ and the Cheaters. And so I called the lady and I said, I've left the band. I'm sure they will find another drummer to play your son's wedding, but if they don't, I will play with them one more time for your son's wedding. She said, well, we had heard you guys do a wedding at a friend of ours' daughter's wedding, and we actually hired the band because we wanted you to be the MC at her wedding. Would you do it without the band? Would you do it with the DJ? Well, sure. I said, well, my lead singer in the band was Tim Jones, TJ, and the Cheaters, and he was voted the #1 DJ in Marion County in 2015. So I contacted Tim and said, would you be interested in doing this wedding? He said, well, hell yeah, we split the money 2 ways instead of 5 ways. So we went and did that wedding. And I'd never done it, just like my first night in pro wrestling, I have never done a wedding before. So I went there and just kind of winged it with Tim doing the music. And I was the one that would go, it's time now for the father-daughter dance. And I had 3 people come up and ask me for business cards. And this one lady, my mother had just recently passed prior to this moment. And this little old lady came up to me and says, I want your business card. I want you to do my granddaughter's wedding. And I said, well, I'm not in the wedding business. And she shook her finger at me, just like my mother used to, and said, you need to be in this business. And I thought, well, my wife's used to be being gone on Saturday nights playing in the clubs. Let me look into it. One thing led to another. One door ended up opening up for me that opened another door up for me that opened another door up for me. And so I literally fell into the wedding business. So I am presently, I have a little part-time job that I do during the day just to have something to do. I drive cars for an enterprise dealership just to give me something to do because I'm basically retired now. Mm-hmm. So on the weekends, I am the #1 DJ MC coordinator for a venue in Southern Indiana called Lakeside Reflections. And I also, if you need for someone to perform your wedding ceremony,
I was about to say, you're ordained, aren't you?
I do this. Dearly beloved and honored guests, we are gathered here today. And then when I quit playing music, I got with my daughter. She's a nurse in a senior living facility. And I said, Christy, do they hire entertainers? Well, yeah, Dad, they do all the time. So I thought the only thing better than going in and letting Elvis Presley, going in and playing guitar and singing Elvis Presley was to let Elvis Presley sing Elvis Presley. Let Frank Sinatra sing Frank Sinatra. So I put together a make-believe radio station called WYOU Radio, taking you back in time. And so I have 18 different senior homes that have hired me, and I go in on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday afternoons and perform for the seniors.
That's great. That is awesome.
You're always busy. I follow you on Facebook, and you're always doing something, it seems like.
Hold on. Come here for a minute. Something funny just happened, so you might as well see this as well. My wife accidentally let one of the cats downstairs.
Hi there.
She's standing on my head. Here, Gracie, you're on a podcast.
Awesome.
She thought that was the cat's meow.
Yeah, cat's meow. Yeah, the cat's pajamas. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on.
Absolutely.
Like I said earlier, you were a big part for wrestling for me. Your voice is burned in my brain. Whether you think you did a lot or not, you did for us and for a lot of other people. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Yes. Absolutely.
Well, I'm on. Thank you. It's something that I never really thought about in my life. It's something that just occurred. And I do have people occasionally say that to me, and it's very nice and rewarding to hear that, especially at this stage of my life. Right now, I'm sitting in my wedding office, And I'm surrounded by all of my little memorabilia that I've got the pictures of me and some of my friends. This is one of my favorite ones. Can you see this?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's the picture of me and handsome Jimmy Valiant going to the ring. That Randy Royal painted this for me.
Oh yeah, I've seen Randy Royal's painting. His paintings are great.
Yeah.
Yep.
And me and some friends of mine are big motorcycle riders. So this is on Route 66.
Nice. That's awesome.
That's the Grand Canyon.
That is awesome.
That's the Devil's Tower. So that's my life.
That's awesome. It's fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on here. We're coming up on our ending point here, and want to say thank you once more. And it's been an honor, and we hope to speak to you again sometime.
Well, let me ask you one thing before you leave. What's the name of your podcast?
It's Developmentally Speaking.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Developmentally Speaking.
Oh, man.
Thank you very much, sir.
Oh, my gosh. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you're tuning in, don't tune out. Because you're listening to Developmentally... spit it out. Developmentally... Now I'm going to have a word there I can't say. Maybe you have to use the first one.
Thank you. I
Thank you.
greatly appreciate it, sir.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Have a great one.
Thank you.
Oh, well, I would end it like this. I'm Dean Hill. See you at ringside.
Hey, everybody, it's Morty.
It's Brian.
And thank you for watching today's episode of Developmentally Speaking.
If you could, please click that subscribe button.
And don't forget to punch that bell icon so you can get notified whenever we go live or drop a new video every Monday. Well, thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you on the next
Developmentally Speaking.